Welcome to Sisters in Crime Australia and Murder Monday, when authors talk about their crime craft. I'm Karina Kilmore, a crime writer, a journalist, and a member of Sisters in Crime, and we've been celebrating women's crime writing since 1991. Before I introduce Sarah Vaughan, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. We pay our respects to all Indigenous peoples of Australia and their elders, past, present, and emerging. Sarah, welcome.
Hi, lovely to be here.
Let me introduce you. You're coming to us all the way from your home just outside Cambridge in the UK. So thank you very much. Morning time for you. Like me, you're a journalist who longed to write fiction, and you now have 5 published novels under your belt. However, you didn't turn to crime until your 3rd novel, Anatomy of a Scandal, a part courtroom drama, portrait of a marriage, a psychological thriller, and also drawing on your experience as a political correspondent, court reporter, and a student at Oxford.
Anatomy, I kind of threw everything in.
Yeah, you did. Anatomy of a Scandal spent 10 weeks in the Sunday Times bestseller list and has been translated into 23 languages. It has also been made into a series which begins streaming on Netflix in April. Yep. Your 4th novel, Little Disasters, was a Waterstones Thriller of the Month and is also now being adapted for the screen. While your 5th novel, Reputation, which has just been released in Australia, has also already been optioned for screen. Before we begin the questions, can you please give us your elevator pitch for your new novel, Reputation?
Okay, so Reputation is about a female Labour MP who stands trial for murder when a tabloid journalist with whom she's become entangled, they've worked on stories and it's spilled over a little bit, is found in her home. And it's really about the difficulty women face in navigating their way through public life with themes of harassment, online abuse, revenge porn and political entitlement. And it's also about the difficulties faced by teenage girls through bullying from frenemies on social media. So my MP, Emma, has a 14-year-old daughter called Flora, and their 2 stories sort of complement one another in that way.
Oh, sounds fantastic, and I can't wait to read it. It's just out now in Australia. Okay, let's get to our questions. Do you start with the plot or the character or something else?
I start with character. But I say that I was asked that at a crime festival this weekend, the first event I've done in 2 years. And I do start with character, but there's often a what if about it. So what if this character was in this situation? That comes pretty soon afterwards. But I think that I always really flesh out my characters first of all, and then I think plot sort of evolves from that. I think plot. Having said that, I do need to know the bare skeleton of the plot, how it's ending, and what the central twist is, the central, pulling the rug under your feet moment is, before I start writing. So unless you've got a really good concept like that, a really good hook like that, and a really good hook, it doesn't really work for me if you don't start going. So I do plot a bit, and plot is important, but it always starts with character. Brilliant. So for this one, do you want me to tell you the starting point for Reputation?
Sure.
Okay. So I was reading an interview with an MP over here in the Times. It was a feature, and she said that she had 9 locks on her front door. She had a panic alarm by her bed, and she was worried about sitting in the bay window of her house in case she was shot at. And I just thought, wow, what would it be like to be that person, to live like that? This MP is in no way that character, that real life person, but it was that scenario. And I started then researching female MPs, and at the time lots of female MPs were coming under a lot of abuse. So that's where that started the character. Yeah.
What's the hardest part about writing this story for you that you found?
I think it's probably the self-doubt. It's probably wading through, self-doubt, perhaps in the middle of it, when you think, have I got enough? Is this sustainable? Is this, are there enough twists? I was very conscious I wanted to write something very gripping. and to try and up the pace a bit. I think it's just that, 100,000 words, or this is 107,000 words, and you'll have to rewrite lots of it lots of times, is quite a marathon. It's very different from a 600-word page lead, which is, what I've been used to as a journalist. And God, so many days I just want a 600-word page lead. I want that. As you'll know from being a journalist, you get that daily validation. You get your name in the paper. And, when I was a political correspondent, sometimes I would have 5 or 6 pieces, if I was on call at the weekend in the paper for the next day. And you don't get that validation at all. You can be beset by self-doubt. So it's just that slow, steady plodding on, I think. And trying to continue the momentum and encourage yourself as well.
What started you on a life of crime?
Well, my first 2 novels were what's dubbed women's fiction for the reading group market. Yeah. And I think it's fair to say that in sort of publishing terms, they didn't set the world alight. Although the second one was a huge bestseller in France, right. And they published it brilliantly, and I had like railway adverts. And that was really, really validating, because I could see that actually my stories had an audience. It wasn't that nobody wanted to read me. It was that in a different territory they did okay. But both those first 2 novels had quite a lot of darkness in. So the first novel was ostensibly about a baking competition, but it's called The Art of Baking Blind, but it was really about motherhood and perfection and the impossibility of perfection. But it had coercive control, eating disorders, a flick of sexual abuse in it. My second novel was called The Farm at the Edge of the World, and it had depression, suicide, sexual assault, near death of a baby, dead animals. It was really quite dark, financial difficulties. And so I mentioned suicide, so it had all of that in it. So unsurprisingly, that didn't do very well with the swirly font cover. Yeah. So I think I obviously was edging in quite a dark direction. And Anatomy was a novel I'd wanted to actually write as my second novel. The Farm might not have existed if I'd done that. So I'd been thinking about it for a couple of years, and I wrote it out of contract. So there were no pressures on me or expectations of what I was going to produce, really, although I did want to write something publishable. And so I guess all the darkness started to spill out then. I think I didn't start writing till I was 40. And so I guess we've all lived a bit, haven't we? And I'm now 49. And so I think we're sort of aware that life can be quite tough. And, I'm not going to sugarcoat that, So maybe I've got angrier as well as I've got older. Yeah. So my books feel like quite angry and feminist now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrific. How do you approach representing diverse communities in your writing?
Well, I was thinking about this because I think I'm probably guilty of not doing so sufficiently. And interestingly, we're adapting my 4th novel at the moment for TV, and that's something that we're looking at to try and be more representative. And Anatomy, which is coming out on Netflix on April the 15th, in the book, I have a barrister who is Northern Irish, because I wanted to have an anti-establishment sort of figure representing this real establishment figure. And in the Netflix series, she's played by a Black actress, by Josette Simon, which I think is absolutely wonderful, and she just commands. She's an former RSC actress. She's just wonderful. She's just has this presence, and she's just wonderful. So when I started writing Reputation, I started to think about why, I've started to really question. I think after Black Lives Matter, we've all sort of been checking our privilege, haven't we, our white privilege. And I started to think about, why have I not got a sufficient number of people of different ethnicities in my book? So I've actually made the prosecuting barrister a female Black QC in Reputation. And I was actually checking the stats yesterday about this, because I'd seen that you'd asked somebody else about diversity, and I was thinking, why are my books so white? And I was thinking that I'm actually writing about, in Reputation and Anatomy of a Scandal, I'm writing about political and sort of elites, really. So the House of Commons and the Bar, and they are overwhelmingly white. So I wanted to be representative of that. I found some statistics. There are only 3 Black female QCs out of, I've got a statistic here, and there are 286 white ones, and there are only 17 male QCs who identify as Black compared to 1,303. So I think it's 1,615 white QCs altogether, and only 17 of those identify as Black. So
that's in the UK, is it, Sarah?
That's in the UK. So there's and that's the QCs are the absolute top tier of barristers. But even so, I think Black and minority ethnic barristers altogether have only gone up to sort of 14% from 0.5% in December 2018. So it's a really disproportionately white profession. And politics as well, I didn't get the details for that, but if you only have to look at the House of Commons to see that Prime Minister's Question Time, that it's this middle-aged white mass predominantly.
Tell us something not in your book about a main character.
So in Reputation, I wrote quite a lot about her father and her childhood as a sort of, I didn't intend to put lots of it in, but just to flesh out that character, to work out what socioeconomic area she came from, and her father was a trade unionist. And I think in an early draft I had a bit more about the influence of her father, and the American copy editor said, I think we should be having more about her father, but by that stage I was 107,000 words in, and I was like, no, actually it's okay, we can have a flick of it, we know as the reader enough, but I know enough about her to hopefully be able to flesh her out.
Great. When and how do you work out plot twists and red herrings?
Right, so as I said, I think I can't start until I know the sort of the spare skeleton. So if I don't want to blur about Reputation, but if I talk about Anatomy, so Anatomy of a Scandal is about a very charismatic, good-looking Tory government minister who is accused of raping a parliamentary aide with whom he's had an affair in a lift in the House of Commons. So very topical over here, and I think over for you guys as well, isn't it?
Very, very.
I think it was a bestseller when it was published over with you, because I think it sort of resonated over there as well. And I actually wrote it a whole year before the Harvey Weinstein allegations came out, or we had Pest and Stroke. I'm not sure about the timing with you guys, but it was sort of something I imagined rather than knew about. But I knew when I came up with this plot, which flukily, and it's never happened before, happened in a dream, I knew what the central twist would be, which I can't tell you. Immediately I knew, and so I knew there would also be a wife, but she wasn't in that immediate wow, what a great idea. The wife wasn't fleshed out as such an important character, and in fact in the TV series she's played by Sienna Miller, so the three leads are really equal. But I did know that the barrister who was prosecuting him was going to be first person and was going to be a really important character. So I knew that then. And with Reputation, I knew something that happens about 40% of the way through. I knew that would happen, and I also knew with both of them what would happen at the end of the trial. So what the verdict was going to be. I did know before I started writing what a really key twist was going to be. I didn't know the final twist for Reputation, and there's a sort of subplot that some of it's told through newspaper letters, not newspaper letters, newspaper articles and Twitter. If I really had played around with different media, which I loved, but I didn't know one tiny thing until I was literally doing my final little edits before we sent it to my US editor. And I was like, that could happen with that. So at the very end, it's like a jigsaw, isn't it? And some things just slot in. And I think this book is more polyphonic and more textured than anything I've written before. And there are lots of little twists that come at the end. Before writing it, I did read a lot of books on a Kindle and noticed that, because I've never done a creative writing course, and I noticed that, you'd be getting a twist at 90% and 95% of the way through, or 99%. Louise Doughty's Apple Yard has a great twist on the penultimate page, so I was aware that I wanted more twists towards the end. But the central twist I'll be aware of before I start.
Yeah, great. How much of a profile do you do for each character before you write?
Quite a lot, actually. I have, and I have sort of random, I'm not very organised online, and I've got lots of random files that will say book 6, which as I'm doing now, and then the character's name, and then I'll find another file where I've dumped loads of information about it. So yeah, I do quite a lot of jottings. I'll jot them down in notepads. I'm not very organised about it, and then I'm currently doing a lot of. I won't let you see the thing. It's okay. So I'm hiding that in case you see my notes, my new book. But I've got my daughter's even diagnosed as dyslexic, and she was told to do lots of mind mapping. So I use a book like this, and I do lots of writing. I'll try and see if I can find one from the previous book. Okay, this is a bit. So what's the book about? Control, and then I'll sort of, do lots of arrows. Not missing usually what that book's about. Yeah. Lots of arrows and lots of, extra points that I might think leading off from one off another, and make it quite free flowing. And I think that's actually quite a fluid and effective way to come up with different character aspects. Yeah. Characteristics.
What is the hardest thing you've had to write about?
Well, probably anatomy's got a rape in it. And I didn't realise until I was writing it that I was sort of exercising a sexual assault in my early 20s. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it, what your subconscious throws up. So I think I felt angry as I wrote it. The rape is actually is described in court through a sort of well, I can't say something else because that will give something away, but there is a rape that's described in court in a very sort of forensic detail, so where was his penis at the time? So what, because I'd observed, being a good journalist, I'd gone and shadowed in a rape trial. I had covered sexual assault trials in the past, but I wanted to go and shadow in a rape trial and a sexual offence trial, and I shadowed a murder trial for this one. And so I'd taken this really, really detailed shorthand note of the cross-examination and the examination in chief of the victim or alleged victim, and so that was felt quite raw writing that. I felt quite angry writing that, and it felt quite raw, but you had to contain it and make it quite forensic. And it's when you're it's certainly when you're going through the scripts then for anatomy, and your own words are being used again by these script writers, and you're thinking, oh, that's quite explicit, because it's necessarily explicit because it had to be realistic. So I think from a sort of personal level that was quite difficult, because it was I'm not saying I was sobbing out as I was writing or anything, but it was like, oh, that stirred up some uncomfortable memories. I wasn't raped, but I think a lot of us have been along the continuum. That stirred up some uncomfortable memories, and also it's quite out there. I was writing a book out of contract, and if anybody would like it, and I'd never read a scene like that, so that was, I suppose, quite difficult to write, but quite liberating as well.
Do women write different crime stories to men?
Oh gosh, well, I would say I tend to read a lot more women. I think women write. Don't women write 80% of novels, or is it 80% of readers are women?
I think 80% of readers are women. Yeah.
So I think I read disproportionately more women than men. I'm trying to think of who of Mick Herron's Slough novels I've read, those sort of spy novels. I'm trying to think who else and obviously people like Ian Rankin and things, but I would not denigrating them at all, but I suppose I would be more drawn to reading books that are perhaps more like psychological thrillers, which I think, maybe a big generalization, tend to be predominantly written by women. I don't know. I'll come up with some awful generalization, but yes, I'm sure we do. Is it trite to say that are we more aware of fear? Are we more aware of the potential for fear? I don't know, because we might have experienced it. I think I books that have got quite I suppose I've read quite a lot of books that have got a sexual assault line within it, or violence against women, I suppose, and I'd rather read those from a female viewpoint. I don't think it's something I do deliberately, but I would say that possibly women are more attuned to the experience of fear. And
they bring that.
And I guess that when we write psychological theories and we read them, we're trying to work our way through those unpleasant feelings and to have some sort of not atonement. I'm sorry, my brain is, but have some sort of resolution, aren't we? Some closure.
That's right.
Good question. Difficult question.
Yeah. How much of you is in one of your characters?
Oh, lots. Yeah, we're not meant to, are we? But I think, yeah, I think Kate, so the character in Anatomy of a Scandal, is the most like me. So she, although she's not a mum, and I'm, you know, I would say being a mum is the thing that sort of probably defines me more than anything. But so Kate is an outsider, and she is trying very hard to do well in the to remain true to her self-belief, but she's quite damaged. And I can't talk any more about it without giving things away, but if you see that, if you read it or if you see the series, you will understand why I feel quite like Kate. But also Emma, and in Little Disasters, the book that comes in between, which is about motherhood and madness, and maternal OCD. There's a character in that called Jess, who's a mum who has very she has a traumatic third birth, and she has really intrusive thoughts, so she sort of sabotages herself through her own thinking. She doesn't need a gaslighting husband, she's sort of doing it herself. That was born out of my experiencing the same thing after my second child, and again that was sort of quite cathartic writing. I realized that actually I was writing about a very lonely experience after having a second baby, and how my thoughts had sort of sabotaged me and had made me really question myself really in my thinking. So yeah, that I couldn't have written that without having experienced it myself. Yes, there's quite a lot of me.
And our last question,
it's not meant to be therapy, is it? But it clearly ends up being it a bit.
No. Our last question for today is, how would you get away with murder?
Do you know what? You just sprung that on me just before we started. I don't think I'm sorry to show a lack of imagination, but I don't think I would. I am such a wuss. So when I was growing up, they had BBC did Miss Marple in the 1980s on the TV. I would have to run from the room if that was showing, you know. I would have to, you know, at sort of tense moments, I would have to put a cushion over my face or run for the room. And the same now when I'm watching thrillers with my husband and daughter. We've just watched something called The Responder. I don't know if it's on the BBC. I don't know if you would get that over.
I haven't seen it yet. Yeah.
No, it's got Martin Freeman in it. It's really good, but it's really tense, and it's like a police procedure, or Line of Duty. I don't know if you get that. And I've had to, I'm just going to make a cup of tea when there's like some woman being killed or something, or someone being pushed from a window, or, you know, I have to go out and rush out at that point, or check my phone for something really important, or, you know, I just think I get away with it. I suppose you'd have to do something really manipulative to make it look like a suicide, to you know, dress it up as if somebody was actually dying by suicide, but you would have given them the tools to do so, or you'd have had to have dressed it. I mean, forensically these days, I was reading my youngest an Agatha Christie the other year, written in it was set between the two wars, and I was thinking, I mean, no wonder she could have so many murders, because there was no DNA, no forensics, you know, Miss Marple pottering around, or Agatha, you know, Hercule Poirot. I mean, nowadays you wouldn't have a chance, would you? No. For Anatomy, for Little Disasters, and for Reputation, I've used a guy called Graham Bartlett, who's a former detective, or former superintendent, and he now is a police procedural advisor. Okay. So I've got him to read through my policey bits, and, you know, check how would you make that work, how would you find this out. And I've also, as I said, attended a murder trial to write this book, and a rape trial to write Anatomy. And I'm just so aware that, you know, if there's a speck of blood, you know, that's going to be detected. So you don't want to be going around stabbing somebody or something, because you're going to have a speck on your shoe. However, or in Reputation, there's a bit where the police forensic team put luminol on the stairs, which, as I understand it, is a chemical that picks up blood even if you've used Dettol on it. It's something about the enzymes. I'm not very good at chemistry, so I don't understand. But basically, even though my character has scrubbed the stairs with Dettol and hot water, this luminol has detected blood spatter, and the way in which the blood has splayed against the wall is indicative of the way in which a character might have fallen. I'm now giving away far too much of the plot, so please forget that if anybody reads it. But it made me realise that actually you can't get away with murder, I don't think, these days, or I don't think I'd be able to.
In fact, Sarah, that's quite comforting that we know you're not going to
yes,
do murder.
I have no plans.
thank you for joining us at Sisters
Oh,
in Crime on Murder Monday.
lovely to see you.